because I have watched what's happened to office building owners who have had too much debt and to multifamily who had too much debt and floating rate debt and made some errors in judgment. And I'm looking at it and I'm saying, boy, if we had debt, I don't know what mistakes I would have made. But with no debt, my investors are safer and I'm safer and I sleep better at night.
If you're within 3 feet of me, we're probably talking about real estate, much to my family's chagrin. But here's the thing. Most people see 7% rates and freeze. I see opportunity. They're waiting for the perfect deal, and I've analyzed thousands of them, and perfect just doesn't exist. So I talk to operators across every asset class, flippers, multifamily syndicators, note investors, and whatever else is working. No sales pitches allowed, just real lessons from people actually doing it. I'm Ed Matthews, and this is Real Estate Underground. Greetings and salutations, Real Estate Undergrounders. It is Ed Matthews with the Real Estate Underground. Thank you again so much for joining us today. I am sincerely grateful for being a part of your day. As I just told the gentleman who's joining us today, I have really been looking forward to this interview. This man, I had the honor and pleasure of interviewing about 3 years ago, almost to the day, if I'm not mistaken. It was May of 2023. Joel Friedland of Brit Properties, welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for joining us. And I have to tell you, some of the takeaways. So I love that we provide an educational platform for real estate investors, whether multifamily or industrial like you or other asset classes. And I fundamentally believe that we can all learn from one another. And I can tell you directly that the lessons you taught in that show, I have used in my own business, and I've weathered some pretty serious storms. And I was absolutely fascinated by your business model, which we are going to get into today, but also your approach and the way that you think about the real estate markets. It fundamentally changed the way, moment we finished that conversation, I started changing our business model to mirror a lot of the things that you do. And I just wanted to let you know that I'm grateful. So welcome back. And I can't wait to have this conversation.
Ed, I am honored to be with you again and to have you say such nice things. Thank you for that.
Truly. Yeah. Joel, for those folks that don't know about you and don't know about the industrial space, why don't you tell us a little bit about you and Brit Properties and anything else you'd like to mention?
My background, I'm 67 years old. So last time you and I
For a
did a podcast
spry
together,
64.
yeah, I was 64. A lot of things have happened personally and a lot of things have happened in business, and they both affect each other. As
Yeah.
my biggest issue is that we just went through this health scare that you know about with my wife. She was diagnosed with pancreas cancer, which is lethal 87% of the time. And she went through treatments and she had surgery, and we're 2 years out, and she is doing remarkably well. So
Wonderful.
we're really grateful for that. And since the last time we talked, we have had two more grandchildren. So now we've got four, and they all live near us, which is great, which keeps Stacy extremely busy and extremely happy.
That's important.
Business wise, we've been buying a lot of industrial buildings like we always have. And last year we bought seven. You may remember that I am hopefully, or possibly, I'd rather say, the most risk averse real estate investor in the United States. We do our acquisitions of our industrial buildings debt free. We still do that. I have put a little debt on a couple of them. We've got a 21% loan to value ratio on a 26,000 foot building in Wooddale, Illinois. And we have a few others that have 30% loan to value that we did years ago. But I don't want to do that anymore because I have watched what's happened to office building owners who have had too much debt and to multifamily who had too much debt and floating rate debt and made some errors in judgment. And I'm looking at it and I'm saying, boy, if we had debt, I don't know what mistakes I would have made. But with no debt, my investors are safer and I'm safer and I sleep better at night. I can't tell you that it's brilliant because it isn't, because if you don't have leverage, you can't make gigantic returns
Right.
like you can if you leverage up 70%. So it's just dollar for dollar. If we make a dollar, we earn a dollar. We don't have that multiple from leverage. But I could tell you some stories about what we are doing and specifically why we buy small industrial buildings, single tenant only, no multi tenant, no shallow bay, no flex, just single tenant buildings where they're between, let's say, 7,000 square feet and 30,000 square feet. And generally, we buy them from families that have manufacturing companies in the buildings that their grandfather or their dad started decades ago. And now it's just time to let them go and lease them back. So we're doing sale leasebacks.
Excellent. And one of the things that I've seen, I somehow recall that we had talked about this, but I've definitely seen it in the interim, and that is that the debt, real estate investors are in desperate need of a 12-step program to wean themselves off of bank leverage. And so I was wondering if you could comment a little more on that.
Yeah, I believe that real estate investors who take a lot of risk and put a lot of debt on their deals are not that different from people who go to the casino and play blackjack or craps, because they're taking a risk that if the market tanks and they have all that debt, that they're not going to be able to necessarily sleep at night and survive. And I'm not saying that it's bad to do that. And I respect real estate investors no matter how they do it. If they do good due diligence and they're careful and they're experienced and they know what they're doing. But when you hear someone say, I'm a deal junkie, you don't want to be in anything junkie.
Right.
So there are all these 12-step programs for people with addictions. And one is AA that was founded by Bill Wilson, and one is CA for Cocaine Anonymous, and there's Overeaters Anonymous. There are all these anonymous meetings that people go to, and they love the meetings and they work on their character defects and on what they do wrong. Gamblers Anonymous is for people who gamble with their money in a way where it hurts them. And the Gamblers Anonymous concept is, let's figure out what gambling means to you if you're a gambler and you've gotten in trouble. And anyone who's gotten in deep trouble owning real estate, when my wife was sitting in that chair in 2008, when I told her that I had $70 million in personal guarantees on 50 buildings, and that 10 of my buildings looked like we weren't going to be able to keep them without selling them for a loss, she fell back in her chair and she said, "Oh my God, I didn't know." Most of these guys or women who are these real estate gamblers don't tell their spouses. And that's another thing that addicted gamblers do, is they hide what they're doing from their loved ones and from people that they know throughout their lives. They hide it because somewhere deep down they know they're taking way too much risk.
Right.
They just know it, but they're doing it. It's easier to come up with 30% down and borrow 70% than come up with 70% down and borrow 30%.
Right.
So I made a decision about 10 years ago that I think I was gambling in real estate with all that debt. And I said, no more, no more. And that's when I set a boundary. And my boundary was 30% maximum LTV, but 3 out of every 4 deals I do, I'm going to do with no debt. And that's the opposite to me of gambling. That's my boundary.
That's stewardship.
But I might be an idiot, right? I could be an idiot, but it's the way I have to do it for my own emotional health and for my family's well-being.
And I'll be the first to admit there have been times in my own real estate career where I was over leveraged and staring at and I ended up selling that property. I didn't sell it at a loss, thank God, but didn't make anywhere near what we could have, and or should have had we done it differently. And The thing I carry with me is staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m., trying to figure out what the heck are we going to do, because I was on the hook for a pretty big banknote in terms of my own personal guarantees, and it was scary. And
Yeah. In '08, I think you know this because you and I know each other, but in '08, I went into this horrible emotional depression. And I was on that couch and I couldn't get off. And it was for months and months. And I'm not going to pull any punches. I thought about, is it worth even living anymore? Do I want to be alive anymore? I didn't really have suicidal ideation or whatever they call it. I wasn't thinking of taking pills, but I was at that point where it just, life felt hopeless. I was so deep in debt and it was so much anguish. Everyone in my family was worried about me and they were watching me really carefully. And I never want to go back to that place. That pain was so palpable. It overtook everything in my life. Every thought, every day, every night was just misery because I was in so much trouble with so much debt. And the decision that I made was that the cause of the trouble was not that I was in the real estate business. It's that the way I was structuring deals, the way everybody does it, just was with too much risk. So these days, we look for little deals. And the reason we do little deals, which are usually under $5 million, is because I could raise that.
right.
I had to raise 9 million for a deal a few years ago. I was freaking nervous. It's a lot of money to raise from
Yes, it
people.
is.
$50,000 and $100,000 per clip, right? At 100,000 for 9 million, I need 90 investors. If it's 50,000, I need 180 investors, 180 conversations, because I have to explain every deal to each investor to an extent.
Right.
They want to know all the details. Why should I go into this? Why should I not go into this? And I have to know the reasons why they should, and I have to know the risks and tell them why maybe they shouldn't.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
A motivated seller just filled out your web form. If you call back within 5 minutes, you're nearly 4 times more likely to get that seller appointment. But delay your follow-up by even just 10 minutes? Forget it. You're toast. Ella Vista Connect calls that lead back in 60 seconds, qualifies them, and schedules your meeting. Find out how much slow follow-up is costing you. Free calculator at ellavista.com/underground.
And so and to get 90, you're talking to a lot more than 180 people. You have a track record and a cadre of followers, so it's a different dynamic for you. But someone who is thinking about weaning themselves off of bank leverage, that's a huge transition.
Yeah.
And like I said, we deal with a much smaller pool of investor partners here. And if I had to go to the folks that I know and the ones that know and trust us, I'd need a whole lot more people to do that. So for me, what that meant was it doesn't mean we aren't chasing deals. We're just chasing smaller deals. Let's hit singles and doubles and grow that, right? And so that's what we've been doing over the last few years.
The hardest part for me, which I've told you a few times, is finding deals.
Indeed.
If the good deal works, the bad deal doesn't work. So how do you find a property that has all of the physical attributes that I want? I'm very picky. I want to have a building that's got loading docks that are easily accessible by over the road trailers. Industrial buildings must have easily accessible loading docks. No dock, no, not interested. They have to have a certain ceiling height, and it depends on the size. The bigger the building, the higher the ceiling height. If I buy a 25,000 square foot building, it's got to have an 18-foot clear ceiling. Higher is better always, because industrial companies have machines that are tall and they stack their pallets, pallets of product, like you see in racks, and they can't really, in 14-foot clear. That's fine for a little building. That's fine for 10,000 feet. They don't need racks because it's not a big warehouse like Amazon.
Right.
But that ceiling height is really critical. And also, as I've said many times, parking is the number one thing. If the building doesn't have enough car parking for the employees and the visitors, and there aren't usually very many visitors, there's usually the people who work on the factory floor and the people who work in the office. But the ratio that we like is 1.5 cars per 1,000 square feet. And the docks, we like to have at least one dock up to 30,000 feet. We prefer two docks. And the ceiling height, 14 feet for the small buildings, but absolutely for sure, I don't want any buildings over 30,000 square feet unless they have 20-foot ceilings.
And one of the things you mentioned, actually two things we were talking about, was one, you're very selective in the towns that in your local area that you focus on. And I thought I was bragging when I told you about my 1,208 properties that I'd like to own, thinking I had gotten it down to a manageable number. And you said I only 700 in my communities. I'm like, okay, then I need to do a better job of culling down because and so when you're that clear on your buy box and you're that clear on the geo that you're looking in, it starts to become pretty obvious that there is a finite and very discoverable set of properties that you can potentially acquire. And in fact, I think you mentioned earlier that one of your strategies is literally knocking on doors.
Yeah. Currently, we have three young guys. Looking for buildings is a young guy job.
Yes, it
It's
is.
not a 67-year-old guy job. Although I
You're a
do it.
56-year-old guy.
I do it. I want you to know I do it. I go to industrial parks and I knock on doors and I find deals. I show the young guys that the old guy can still do it.
Right.
And I go with them. Last year, one of our summer interns found a deal.
Nice.
Yeah, he walked into a building. It was 10,000 feet in a town called Wooddale, which is one of the towns we will buy in. We have 20 towns of the 200 towns in the Chicago area that we would buy in, and the other 180, no interest. Because the
So,
values don't go up. They don't look nice. The curb appeal's bad. They're old buildings. They're not functional, or they're in the wrong county and the taxes are too high. 20 towns. I'm looking at 700 buildings within those 20 towns of the 17,000 industrial buildings in Chicago. So the other 16,300, no interest. Someone brings me one of those deals. The answer is no, not interested. No, we know what we want.
and that focus has to help you in terms of operating as well. I am curious about more economic trends. And since the last time we've talked, there's been a pretty big push to repatriate industrial manufacturing. And I'm curious if that has affected you or changed your thinking in terms of the properties that you're seeing and the opportunities that you're seeing in the market.
It makes me optimistic to believe that the majority of the country does believe that we should be making things here. But the political way of looking at this, which is bring it all back, does not match the economics where you can't make a product here in a warehouse in Chicago where we are, or where you are in Connecticut or in Texas or in any of the red states, in the smile states. You can't make a product that sells on the shelf in Target for $30. You can't make it here. It would cost you $30.
Right.
So you'd lose money on that product on the shelf. I have a friend who's in the educational toy business, and he makes a lot of his products in China. So he just went through a situation with the tariffs, and he makes them in India. And the reality is that almost every product on every shelf, it's maybe not food made locally, the company that manufactures it has to consider offshore manufacturing, because you can make the product for $8 there where you can make it for $30 here. So there's certain things that can be done here and must be done here because of national security issues.
Sure.
But no, the answer is no. There's always going to be offshore manufacturing. They're not bringing it all back. But yes, I like the fact that the attitude is let's make it here.
That's a good thing. Yeah, the sentiment is right. It's the actual how it plays out that's more interesting. And I know that Flex Industrial is not part of your investment thesis, although it's something that I've been looking at quite a bit here in the Northeast. Maybe for me, it's because 37% of the people that have mortgages, single family homes, they have a mortgage under 4%, and another 33 or so percent have their own properties free and clear. So they're, instead of moving, because you can't replace that, right? Instead of moving, they are rehabbing and renovating their houses. And if they want a nice new kitchen, they build one instead of going and buying one, right? And so the flex industrial space has become a really hot asset class here in the Northeast for that exact reason. And so plumbers, HVAC, electricians. And I'm curious, I know that's part of your, I'm sure it's very active in your area as well, because Illinois and Connecticut economically tend to trend in parallel. And you're not very interested in that space. And I'm curious what that I don't.
I don't like flex space and I don't like multi-tenant buildings. The reason, we have a group of people in the United States who like to own their own buildings where they manufacture or distribute their products. It's a very large group. We have a lot of people who are tenants. Generally speaking, when you lease a flex building or a multi-tenant building to 7 tenants, you're going to get low credit, short-termers who can move out anytime. And when you have a manufacturing company that's been in business for 30 years and they're in their own building and they own it, they're not going anywhere. So when we buy our buildings, we buy from those type of people who have a freestanding building with a lot of machines that they can't move, as opposed to landscapers, lighting companies, pool boy companies.
Right.
We don't want any of those they're not fly by night, but we don't want any of those who can fly away at night.
They're transient companies for sure.
Yeah, and they're just not, there's not as much depth to the financial backing and strength of the company. So we have 26 buildings and more than half of them have been occupied by the same tenant for longer than 25 years. That's not true in these multi-tenant buildings for the most part. They come and go. Worse than that for me is I like to have 2 exit strategies. And one exit strategy is to sell a building to another investor on a cap rate, just like multifamily. A multi-tenant building is just a different use, which is industrial, for cap rate purchases and sales. The difference is that I have a secondary secret sauce, I'm telling you my secret sauce, exit strategy for the buildings we buy that are single tenant, which is when the tenant leaves, the neighbor who would love to own a building, and he may be in one of those multi-tenant buildings and he couldn't find one to buy, that we sell to those users because they want pride of ownership. They don't want to piss the money away anymore in rent. You can't have an exit strategy with a 7-tenant building to sell it to a user. Nobody who's in 3,000 feet is going to buy a 21,000 square foot building to occupy 3,000 feet. Right. They don't have the money. They don't have the depth. They don't.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
So we have sold, this is a crazy number. We've sold 82 buildings of the 108 that we bought. So we have 26 remaining. And of the 82 that we've sold, 77 of them have been to user owners. Now they pay a premium over what it would be, what someone would pay for the building if it was leased on a cap rate. And I'm going to give you a perfect example. We bought a building in a town here called St. Charles, where we already owned another building. And this building was 22,000 square feet. And we bought it vacant, which we hardly ever do. Usually we do a sale leaseback where we have the tenants stay for a few years and hopefully renew their lease and they'll stay for more years. We buy usually from these families who love to stay in the building with their business, but cash out so they can, all the brothers and sisters who are the grandchildren of the founder, I'll take their cash out. So we give them the money, they take their cash and they go buy their summer home. We have this one building on Stern Avenue in St. Charles. We bought it in terrible condition. Someone who was occupying it had obviously money problems. The roof was shot. The bricks were crap. The doors were shot. The HVAC was crap. The parking lot's crap. So the building is probably worth to a user $3 million. We bought it from the seller because we know how to fix them up. This is a fixer-upper. We bought it for $1.9 million, and we knew we were going to spend $400,000 to fix it up. So we're into it for $2.3 million. I went door-to-door canvassing in the neighborhood myself 2 weeks ago, and I called on the neighbor across the street, Jim. I walked in, and I said, we just bought that building across the street. He said, shit, I would have bought that building. We got there first. Jim says, I'm in 12,000 feet and I need 22,000 feet and I'd like to stay on this street. So I said, okay, we'll lease it to you. He says, no, I'm a buyer. I said, okay, what would you offer? He wasn't sure. So he hired an industrial real estate broker who's an expert in the market, a guy named Michael, who I've known for years. And Michael calls me and he says, Jim wants to buy the building. And I know you're only into it for $1.9 million. I said, no, Michael, we're into it for 2.4. We spent $400,000 and we also had acquisition costs. He said, Jim will pay you $1 million over what you paid to buy it. And I said, no, we're keeping it. He said, come on, are you crazy? I said, I think I am crazy. So Michael calls me back a few days later. He says, I'll sweeten the pot. Jim will sell you his building, which is 12,000 feet, so you can still own a building on the street, and he'll still pay you $1 million profit on your building. And I said, let me get back to you on that. So yesterday I talked to Michael. I said, okay, we'll do it. We'll buy Jim's building. He can have ours. So we're into this thing for $2.4 million. It ended up getting worse than that. He's only at $3.3 million as a purchase price, and we're in for 2.4. But we've owned it since December. But now we have a problem, which is if you sell a building before a year's up, you have to pay ordinary income tax. You don't get capital gains. So I'm not sure how to handle that, because if we could wait till December, my investors will get 20% more money because the government won't get that because of the capital gains benefit. So that's what a user sales strategy is. And that's why we sold 77 to the people in the area, as opposed to, hey, it's leased and we'll sell you the building for a 7 cap or a 6 cap.
Sure.
We don't do that.
And so when you decide to sell a building, what drives that?
Either it's an outsized profit, or we had a tenant and the tenant left and we haven't filled it with a new tenant. We have to decide, do we carry it vacant or do we let it go and take the profit today?
Okay.
But it's a lot like your business, because in your debt fund, you loan money to people who do homes, right?
That's right.
And it's the same thing. A home is someone really needs or wants. They love it. And they'll pay more than someone who's buying something for a cap rate. Yes?
Correct. Absolutely.
So you're in the same model we are, but you do it with single family homes and we do it with single tenant buildings.
Yeah, it's all the same. It's very similar models, right? And that even the smaller multifamily where you're buying value add, it's the same play. It's just writ large, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And then when you sell, are you selling is it always for cash, or do you do any seller financing or to manage cap gains, or you just want out
No, we're dealing with millionaires. They don't need to have any financing.
They're not looking to balance.
Pay cash, or they go to their bank and they buy it on the line of credit. And so I'll give you an example. Another one, we bought a building in the city. It's 20,000 square feet. You can see that 20,000 feet is our favorite size, because the companies that occupy them are big enough that they can afford to pay the rent and they've got deep pockets. Yep. So this is a company called Beverage Flavors, and they make flavorings for drinks. And it's owned by a family. The company is, and we bought the building and we leased it back to them for 7 years. They contacted me. Fortunately, they're closing on Monday. They're selling the business. And fortunately, we're taping this today and it's not going out tomorrow, because I don't want anyone to see, oh, I'm talking about them selling their business.
Your secret's safe.
Yeah. Okay. So they get approached by this company out of Kalamazoo, Michigan, that it's 10 times larger than their company. And it's backed by the largest private equity group in the world, a group called Warburg Pincus. Huge, multi-billion. So the Warburg company, the company that Warburg as a private equity group is buying and going to be running, is now going to be replacing the family that own the company, the beverage flavors, and they're going to change the name to the same name as the company, Kalamazoo. But this is the situation. If it's 20,000 feet and it's freestanding, great companies want that. They don't want to be in a multi-tenant building with shared walls where someone could have an odor next door. They could have a noise next door. They could fight for parking in the parking lot. The roof leaks. You don't know if the leak's coming from over there or if it's coming from right above us. The single tenant building just makes rich people happy. And then,
It's simple, right? It removes a ton of complexity.
yeah, exactly.
And as an old friend of mine used to say, it limits brain damage as well.
Exactly.
Joel, so one of the things that I did see is that you have brought, I believe, your son Sam into the business. You mentioned he's also traveling, so I don't know if that's still the case, but I'm curious about how you're teaching your brother Mark, who I also know has been involved. How are you teaching them the discipline of a no debt acquisition strategy and passing that on to your son and whoever else is, and Mark and whoever else is involved?
They understand because they were with me when I went through my hell and my depression and my very difficult time 16 years ago,
Yeah.
17 years ago. And they saw it and they know why I'm coming from where I'm coming from with the no debt and or very low debt. And they understand it. They know that if they're going to work with me, that's just what our foundation is all about. We have a deep foundation. You build a house, it's got to have a foundation. It can't be just built on dirt.
Yeah.
And my foundation is very well spelled out in the office. Mark and I were talking today, and he's making some cold calls to find some properties. And we were playing with the script. Hi, this is Mark Friedland. I'm calling to see if you might consider selling your industrial building. We're local buyers. We own 26 buildings. We pay cash with no mortgage, and we'd love to lease it back to you. So Mark and I were scripting today a little bit. We have 2 summer interns, and the reason we were doing it is we want to help them with the best script. So they actually go on the street door to door and they walk in. They walk right in. They just walk in.
I love that.
And they have the name in our database of the owner of the building, and they ask for the owner. They often get thrown out. Goodbye. No, we're not selling.
Go pound sand, kid.
Yeah, but yesterday Mason found one and Brandon found 2 that are maybes. Everybody understands my philosophy, and if they want to be part of my organization, I'm driving it. I'm the driver, and as a driver, it's this really risk-averse program, and I can't change it because I have to have mental health that works for me.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. And so when you're talking with potential investor partners and they're buying into the model, what is their thinking in terms of the problem you're solving for them? These are not, correct me if I'm wrong, these are not 20+% returns on, these are singles and doubles, and sometimes you hit it out of the park. But so I'm curious what their thinking is as they're coming into evaluating the opportunities that you and your team uncover.
So there are 2 separate mentalities of investor. There's the investor who's made a lot of money, has a lot of money, and doesn't want to lose it. Yeah. And then there's the investor who's like a gambler, maybe doesn't have as much, and says, I better get going. I better take some risk and make some big upside. And I tell the people who want to take the risk and the big upside, if they want to invest with me, I'm going to be the little corner of their portfolio that we're not taking those kinds of risks. And if they say, yeah, I could use a corner of my portfolio to be stable and steady, they'll go in. But if they're really the throw it at the wall and hope for the best and make
Cowboys.
Yeah, 10 times your money if it works and lose all your money if it doesn't, those are generally speaking not going to be my people. But the wealthy folks, of my 250 investors, I'm going to guess the average net worth is probably $20 million. And they're not looking to get rich quick. They're already rich. They're just looking for somewhere to put their money that's not the casino of the stock market. We know the stock market can go way up and can go way down. And I watch this Thoughtful Money economics podcast that has all these really smart people talking about how this market's going to crash and that market's going to crash. And my answer is the people who join me, who are these risk averse folks, they really don't care if they buy in with me and the market crashes, because we won't feel
Doesn't
it
matter.
the same way that everybody else does. And their money in those deals is like their safe money.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a diversification play and you're not swinging for the fences. That is truly valuable. And it's unique because when I've had these conversations with multifamily investors, it's like I'm talking to a puppy and I just made a very loud, high pitched sound and their heads tilt like I don't understand the words coming out of your mouth. And it's very funny. Like I said, we've done a couple of these deals where one was very thin on the leverage and the other was no leverage whatsoever. In fact, I'm doing a deal potentially. It just got handed to me this morning, and we ran some numbers and presented them about an hour and a half ago, as a matter of fact, that I think we're in the ballpark of where they want to be. And it is a heavy renovation project. It's 19 units here in the local area and I'm going into it all cash. I'm not putting leverage on that.
I'm glad that you heard me a few years ago
I
when
did.
we talked
Loud and
about it,
clear.
and that you liked it. I'm not an evangelist for debt free, thinking that everybody should do it, or maybe that even anybody should do it. I'm glad that there aren't very many people. I think there's 4,000 syndicators in the United States. That's a rough number, with $50 million or more
Yeah.
of assets under management. And I would say that there probably are less than five that do mostly debt free. And the interesting thing is, I don't know who the other four are.
Right. So I'm
I
not at
got
that
one
level. So
investor.
I'm not one of them. I can tell you that.
I've got one investor who puts $200,000 into everything I do. And
Yeah.
he calls me and he says, "Who else does what you do? Since you do it, you should know." And I said, "Mark, I don't have any idea who else does this." He says, "When you find them, you call me."
Because I'd like to do business with them as well. Right.
Right,
That's
exactly.
hilarious. Well,
Yeah.
someday I'll grow up to be that maybe. The one thing that I am really curious about, and you touched on it, but I'd like to drill into it before we go to the lightning round, is you have used leverage, although quite a small slice of the deals. What made you decide strategically and even tactically to use that bank leverage?
I was younger.
Okay.
I was able to take more risk. I had a partner that pushed the crap out of me to take more risk and borrow more money. And it was just a different mindset. I hadn't gone through the downturn that was so devastating. And we were optimistic. In 2002, I bought 17 buildings. And I put debt on all of it. Everything was more than 60% leverage. And some of them are gigantic grand slam home runs. But what happened was, some of them, when we came to 2008, hit the wall.
Yeah.
And I just don't believe that there's any reason to convince other people not to use leverage. Real estate's a leverage business. So I'm not trying to convince anyone that my way is the right way. It's just the right way for me. The best deal we ever made, we bought Keebler Cookies, 100,000 square foot building in Elmhurst, Illinois. It's where they had the hollow tree and all the elves in a room, like all the toys. And I walked in and I saw this hollow tree and my friend stole the elf. So, so they got bought out by Kellogg's.
Yeah.
And I looked at this building and I drove by it for months and months. And I called the broker and I said, "I know this has been on the market for a long time. I'd like to buy it." And I did. I bought it for $6 million and we put leverage on it. And it went vacant. And Comcast, which is a very large company, needed 100,000 square feet in Elmhurst with the parking lot for their Xfinity vans. And there were 550 parking spaces for 100,000 square feet, which is highly unusual. So they signed a 15-year lease. And we ended up making, this is crazy, the IRR for a 15-year lease was 40%. That's not 40% for a couple years and then get rid of it. That's 40% across the board for 15 years. So we bought it for 6 million, we sold it for 17 million, and our equity was 2 million because we had leverage. It was such an incredible grand slam home run. You can't do that. If we had bought it all cash, we still would have done really well, but you can't do that kind of home run necessarily without putting a mortgage on.
Amen to that. So yeah, that makes sense. But you're in a different place right now, and swinging for the fences is not really where you want to be. And I hear you. I think there is a place for leverage in my business, but I'm very circumspect to do it. I need a really good reason before I'll consider it at this point.
I'll give you a baseball analogy. If you knew, forget singles, doubles, home runs, and all that, if you knew that you had a way as a batter to never strike out, you're the only batter in the entire world who will never strike out, ever.
Right.
Okay. Now, you might hit the ball and it might be a single and you might walk, but you never strike out, which is every batter
Impossible.
the batter looks at the umpire and goes, that wasn't a strike. Bad things happen to real estate owners. That shouldn't have happened. That's exactly how I feel. I feel like we're the batter that will never strike out. We might have a walk, we might get a single, we might get a double, we might even get a home run every now and then. But if a strikeout is losing all your marbles, we're not going to strike out, because with no debt or 30% max, no bank is going to tell us we've struck out.
Right.
Sell your building, Joel. I don't know if I told you that in the Bible, it's in Proverbs 22, it says the borrower is the slave to the lender. We
True
don't want to be
statement.
anyone's slave.
Right.
It's like, I got all these little sayings that have to do with safety.
Yeah, it's an absolutely fascinating business model. It is truly unique. I do not know, and I know a lot of investors. I do not know anyone other than you that does it this way. And I hope the folks that are listening out there really listen and to what Joel's talking about, because this isn't necessarily a universal strategy for you. You may still need leverage to do what you want to do, but this is absolutely a viable way to build wealth slowly and conservatively over time. So I'm 56, if I were 35, this is something that I would probably do more than I do today, because I know time is my friend, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And even at 56, I'm doing it more and more because, as Joel has mentioned and I alluded to, I do not like brain damage. I sleep a whole lot better knowing that the couple of deals we've done that are very low and no leverage are safe and sound, and I don't really care what happens to the rest of the market.
I love it.
Yeah,
Hey,
it's
thank you for giving me some credit for that.
sole credit for that. You were literally the only person that I know in this business that has given me that advice, and I took it, and I'm grateful.
I'm glad.
So you didn't have an influence. You had a profound effect on the way that I think about real estate,
Exactly.
and I am grateful. So with that, let's get into the lightning round. How are you on time, Joel?
I'm good.
Okay. Final five. So obviously you've done extremely well. You've taken care of the things you need to take care of in terms of your family and all that. And nevertheless, you still go to work on Monday mornings. And I look at that. I had the benefit of working with some pretty amazing people in Silicon Valley, and same thing. They had more money than they knew what to do with. I had one boss who literally bought the Russian embassy in San Francisco and made it his home, right? So we're talking billions of dollars. And nevertheless, that guy, Keith Kroc, and you and others get up and go to work. And I'm curious what drives you? What is your purpose?
I'm going to give you two answers. Number one, I'm going to tell you that my mother's 89 and she's a marriage counselor and she still does it. And she goes out to lunch with her 89-year-old friends and she loves them and they're great. But she says, they got nothing going on. Their brains are not engaged in helping people or in working or in challenges. Let's go play bridge. Let's go to this lunch. Let's go to that lunch. Let's play a little golf. So, number one is mom's is my idol in terms of working all the way. And Nate Wagner, who's my 98-year-old partner, he didn't stop working until he was 95. And maybe that's why he's 99. That's number one. Number two, people sell their businesses, really wealthy billionaire type people sell their businesses. And what do when they're older? They go into real estate investing.
Yeah.
So it's not even to them, it's not a business, it's a hobby. And so I'm in a business that rich people go into when they have all the money in the world and have to figure out what to do. They pick our business.
Right.
And we get to be in it forever.
That's phenomenal. Yeah, it's interesting. I had a friend of mine ask me not that long ago. He's done very well for himself. He just sold his company and he's thinking about retiring. And he said, when are you going to retire? And I said, never. Why would I? I can do one or two deals a year forever.
Yeah.
I said, I'm going to stop when I can't see the paper and my hand shakes so much I can't make the signature. Then I'm done.
Yeah, exactly.
But as long as my brain can figure out the deal, I'm in. So, Joel, obviously you've been a big influence in my life and I know others, but I'm also really curious about the people that you've had in your life who've influenced you, your mentors. And I'm curious about the best advice you ever got and who was the person who gave it to you?
I had four mentors when I was 22, when I worked for the Podolsky family: Richard, Steve, Randy, and Milt. It was a family business, and they were the greatest mentors ever. For 10 years, they taught me every day. And I think that's what people have to do. They have to find a mentor or a group of mentors who are just amazing. Steve Podolsky to this day is still an investor with me. He goes into at least half of my deals. He's in his 70s. Stacy and I and another couple she's got pancreas cancer as well, are getting together for dinner next month with the Podolskys. It's building mentorships that last forever. And the Podolsky family was it. And then now Nate Wagner, who's my 99-year-old friend, big time real estate guy. We have breakfast every Saturday, and I'm writing a book called Breakfasts with Nate.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yeah, yeah.
Where are you in the process? Are you getting
Chapter
to?
one.
Oh, okay. All right. That's okay. That's good. I had a mentor. His name was Mike Gonerman, and he was the CFO of a company that I worked for, and for whatever reason took a liking to me. And I would have breakfast with him every once a month at the Newtown Marriott just outside Boston. And I'd buy him scrambled eggs, and I would basically spend 45 minutes. I'd spend 15 minutes telling him at that point where I was in technology how we're conquering the world and setting the world on fire. And then he'd spend the next 45 minutes telling me how I was screwing up and another 5 minutes on how to fix it. And it's having those people in your life is invaluable.
I bought Nate breakfast almost every Saturday for 15 years. And I can tell you that I've spent at least $20,000 on breakfast.
Money well spent.
I won't let him pay.
Yeah, good. And he's giving you the benefit of a lifetime of experience. So why would you? And it's only scrambled eggs. It's going to be okay. I'm also curious about, you've been in an opportunity and you've been in multiple opportunities and you've seen a lot of market changes. And I want to ask you, and it may be a painful question, but I want to get your insights anyway. When you look back on your career and you look at decisions that you've made, what's one that sticks with you that you look back, knowing what you know today, you look back on it and go, oh, I would love to have that one back. And how did you manage your way through it?
Yeah, my partner was 10 years younger, Dave. And he said to me, I think it was 2007, right before the crash, we need to be in other kinds of real estate. Let's do retail. And I said, oh, I don't want to do retail. He said, I've got two parcels. We're going to buy the old RC Cola plant on the south side of Chicago, which is going to be a retail development. It's 11 acres. Let's buy that. And there's a place in Vernon Hills. It's 6 acres. It's on Milwaukee Avenue. There's a lot of traffic. Let's buy that. And let's develop retail, restaurants, banks, McDonald's, strip centers. I said, Dave, I don't want to do that. He said, do you trust me? I said, of course. He said, go with me on this. I'll make you money every day. We lost money every day.
Yeah.
And then on both of those deals, we lost money, both of them. When you look at my track record of 82 sales, we've had losses. We've had 10 losses. 2 of them were the retail redevelopment idiocy that I agreed to.
Yeah.
It's not what we do. It's not my expertise.
So
And
the advice there is
horrible. The timing was horrible.
Yeah, timing matters and stick to your knitting, right?
Yeah, we lost millions.
I'm sorry to hear that, but it looks like you've recovered nicely. So I'm happy for that. So I'm curious about the book on your nightstand. What are you reading these days? Who are you paying attention to?
I am reading 1929 by Andrew Ross Sorkin. He draws all of these parallels between what's happening in 2026 to what was happening in 2028, right before the stock market crashed and the Great Depression.
1928.
1928, excuse me. Yeah, I'm in the wrong century. But this 1928 period with all these hot shots who were controlling the market and worked for these big companies and driving things. And then the decisions they made and the crazy things they did and the risks they took and the hubris, that cockiness.
Yeah.
And they just got crushed. And he wrote this book to say, look, it could happen again. This is what happened then, and here's how it happened, and here's who the players were. It's been very interesting.
I'm looking forward to reading it. It's like I told you earlier, the reason I asked that question is selfishly motivated, and that is because I'm looking to build my own reading list. So thank you. So Joel, last question, and then we'll move on to the close. How do you define success in your life?
It's by the relationships of mutual trust.
Well, Joel, once again, I am grateful and I'm really happy to see you. I'm glad Stacy's doing well and I'm glad you're doing well. And I'm curious when you are, I think I know the answer to this, but when you're not talking about real estate, what do you like to do for fun?
Gardening.
Not what I thought. All right. I figured you were going to go grandchildren, but okay.
It all starts with G.
There you go. Right? Gardening. So tell me more.
We have lived in the same house for 36 years. And I have planted a minimum of 100 various kinds of plants every year. So I've planted thousands and thousands of plants. If you walk around our property, we have all these different hostas and hydrangeas. And I've learned where to put them if they do well in the sun and where to put them if they do well in the shade. And Stacy loves color. So when she got sick, she said, honey, I love color. I went to the nursery and I bought all these flowers and just it's yellow and it's purple and it's pink and it's orange. And it's just so much fun. I get my hands dirty. I get my clothes dirty. I ruin my shoes. I get poison ivy. It's like everything that you can imagine in gardening. But gardening is like a metaphor for life. And it's the same as building a portfolio. You build your gardens a little at a time and they grow and they expand and you take care of them and you water them. And it's just so much fun. I love stepping back after planting 30 plants and seeing what I put in there. I go, Stace, come out. I got to show you what I put in. And she comes out. She goes, oh yeah, that's really nice. She's sick of it.
That's how you know you're doing it right, though, is when the people that asked for it are like, okay, enough, right? Yeah. Joel, if people want to learn more about you or your business, what's the best way to do that?
The website is britproperties.com, BRIT with one T, properties.com.
All right. Joel Friedland, thank you. It's good to see you and continued good fortune, sir.
You too. Thank you.
This has been the Real Estate Underground. Don't forget to subscribe. It helps us grow. Until next time, Undergrounders, remember your real estate journey begins with a simple step forward. Now get to it. Bye for now.